This YouTube channel is sponsored by Uber Eats, which means we'll have an ad from them somewhere in the middle of today's video. I have had to keep this secret for several years, but it is finally out in the world. God of War, Laufey. I had the genuine honor of writing on this game for 4 years with the incredible team at Sony Santa Monica Studio, and today I'm excited to share all of their secrets. Kratos is gay. No, I'm kidding. Or am I? No, I definitely am. But I am going to finally talk about a whole bunch of stuff that I learned writing on my first AAA video game. I have taken these lessons to the indie game that I'm making, wishlist layers deep on Steam, and any of the other video games that I have worked on since. But first, I must provide context because I've never even been allowed to acknowledge that this project existed. Before this week, I've had to be so incredibly vague about what the hell I was doing, which has been honestly very difficult to navigate, and I'm so sorry to the people who have repeatedly asked me the very simple question, what was your day-to-day like? What's writing a video game like? And I couldn't even answer that until now. My contract and NDA are very specific and very different to most game developers because I have a following. I recognize that I opted into that when working at a AAA studio. So I joined the project as a junior writer. I was actually one of the first 2 writers on the team, which is wild to think about. 2 of us joined on the exact same day, which is myself and Elise Morgan.
My name is Elise Morgan, and I am the lead writer on God of War Laufey.
And at that point in time, I think the team was maybe 4 people in total. Like, adding the 2 of us made it 6. And the only thing that was really set in stone before I got there was that it was a Fey game. But everything else we figured out together as more and more people slowly joined the team. Which, before I get any further, huge congratulations to the team on finally announcing this game. These people work incredibly hard, doing something that is incredibly difficult. I know people say it all the time, but game dev is all but impossible at this scale for a multitude of reasons. It's so difficult. And Santa Monica Studio manages to succeed despite this over and over and over due to the tremendous talent and relentless hard work of the people who work there. I hope that you are all as proud of yourselves as I am of you. And I very selfishly appreciate you all so much for continuing to make it because I cannot wait to play it. I'm really excited. So I joined as a junior writer and then was promoted to just a regular level writer after about a year. They're worth noting that there was very little difference between those 2 titles. I got promoted because I was always doing staff writer level work effectively. And I left at the end of 2024 to very little fault of the studios. I had a family member battling with cancer, and that ultimately led me to decide I should spend more time back in Australia. But yeah, at the time that I left, the team was 5 writers, which is me, Lauren Signorino, and Orion Walker, who both also worked on Ragnarok, Jeremy Bernstein, and Elise Morgan. I'm sure a number of writers whose names I don't know have now also written on this game, and they should be credited accordingly. I just don't know their names, unfortunately, because I haven't worked with them. However, this is why this long-winded explanation is relevant, I promise. Most of my time there was in pre-production, which is setting up the world and the characters, of course, under the direction of Elise Morgan and game director Ariel Lawrence, and I think his title now is franchise head Corey Barlog, who was also very heavily involved in the concept stage.
Hi, I'm Corey Barlog, head of creative at Santa Monica Studio. I would like to introduce Laufey's game director, Ariel Lawrence.
They are still the ones ultimately making the decisions with this kind of game. It's the job of the writers underneath them to help them do so, in no small part by presenting ideas, coming up with characters, story beats, levels that ultimately serve their vision or their idea, which was such an incredibly fun job, by the way. The early parts of development, where it was just this tiny group brainstorming together all day, every day, pretty much, was one of the best professional experiences of my life. It was so fun. If you watch my streams at all, you already know that I'm a regular customer of today's sponsor, Uber Eats. And so is Banjo. But seriously, being able to order a coffee and a breakfast burrito for any of the mornings where I've woken up and had to spring straight into work is one of the greatest privileges of the modern age. I am not even slightly exaggerating. It rules. I've also just found so many cool food spots through Uber Eats that I probably wouldn't have even heard of otherwise. I just this weekend had brunch at a restaurant that I order from all the time that I originally found through an Uber Eats daily deal. It was my first time going in person, and it was kind of like seeing a celebrity. Like, I was like, oh, hey, huge fan of your work. It's so nice to meet you in person. And there are tons of daily deals. There are new ones every single day, and hundreds of restaurants on Uber Eats with so much variety. It's Chinese, Mexican, sushi, pizza, ice cream, soul food, wings, Thai, barbecues, sandwiches, bakeries, and a category I don't pick as often as I should, but I really appreciate the presence of healthy. So order from Uber Eats and use code Alanah15 to get $15 off your first order of $20 or more. Details are in the description below. Thank you, Uber Eats, both for the code and for sponsoring the channel. Now back to the video. As an example, I was the one who originally pitched Begsy, the big red guy that you saw in the gameplay, and I did a bunch of early character work for him. Rue came from Elise, I believe Sekhmet was Lauren, Frank was Corey. I think those are all of the name characters in the gameplay, but yeah, huge part of the job is just coming up with what the hell the game is. While I did write, I think 3 levels worth of dialogue. I might be forgetting something. What I'm saying is it was at least 3. There could be more than I don't remember. I would not be surprised if a lot of that specifically has changed, as is the nature of game development. The people who are working as writers there today are having to do much more of the dialogue-focused work, which is why I'm not really going to talk about that here. I'm sure I'll point out the levels and lines or whatever that I did write when the game is out. I did not write any of the dialogue that is in the gameplay that you've already seen, for example. I would guess that that was largely written by Elise Morgan, but the vast majority of my time was working on character building, world building, and story structure stuff with a team of about 5 writers. Basically, the job of a writer in early stages of development of a AAA video game is to assist the narrative leadership in building the world, and then you start writing levels, which are structured and written very similarly to a film script. So with all of that out of the way, let me talk you through what I consider to be the most valuable things that I learned. Some of this might seem basic, but it's the information that I give any hopeful game writers or students who approach me asking where to start. So first, pillars. If you don't know about this one, you should, but even if you do, it's always worth going over. When you start out making a video game, you gotta know what you're making, and being very, very specific about what that vision is tremendously helpful for the rest of your team. It is most efficient to give yourself really specific boxes, specific confines, specific limits, things that prevent you from allowing the inevitable feature creep to overtake your dev cycle. Pillars are about focusing what your game is. If it's not addressed by a pillar, it probably shouldn't be part of your game. The way that I use these now is effectively your narrative pillar. What is your protagonist going through? What's the core of the story? What's the theme? Figuring this out from day one makes everything that comes after so much easier. If one of the writers isn't sure how to approach something or how something should feel, for example, does the pillar answer it? In most cases, it should. And I do often think back to a thing that Corey said for this pretty often. He basically asked the question, what is the scattering the ashes at the top of the mountain moment? Which is basically, what is that constant goal your protagonist and thus your player is working towards in your story? How can you tie every other thing that they do into that goal in some way, even if it has to be vague, so that they always have motivation, so players always know where they're going, even when they're side questing? What is the drop the ring in the fires of Mount Doom? Basically, starting with pillars and really narrowing them down and locking them in will make however many following years of game development you have much easier in many ways. Namely, your whole team is on the same page, so when the different departments come together, you have a cohesive video game. Second, characters. After pillars, this would be my next starting point as a writer. You get your narrative pillar, your simply stated goal of the story, and then you build your cast of characters. Not all writers work this way. I almost always plot after knowing the characters so that my characters and who they are can influence the plot. It's basically like, I already know where we need to head specifically, like there's a story one-liner from the pillar stage, but the way we get there, to the top of the mountain to spread the ashes, can twist and weave based on who my characters are, what they do, and how they would influence the world because of who they are. This is, in my opinion, how you get active participants instead of stories just full of events just happening to your characters. This would usually start with a character bio, a written document that contains a short synopsis of who your character is, and then a much longer version of that synopsis that includes any relevant backstory, who they are, why they are, how they are, just an entire picture of who this person is. I wrote the first character bio for Faye, which was probably 5 or so pages at the time, and then actually a short story, literally in short story format, of her walking around Jotunheim. You will never see that. It probably will never be used publicly, but it was there to like explore her as a character and how she would exist in a space. I had forgotten that I did that until just now. Each of the writers wrote one for a different character. It was a very cool thing to do as a group, to like get to know your characters in a fictional setting where it feels like they're living and breathing because it's not just a script, it's a short story. Which, yeah, you don't have to do your initial character writing work in big boring documents if you don't want to. Tim Schafer, for the original Psychonauts, made all of his characters little profiles on, it was like Friendster or something like that, like a MySpace kind of website. Some website where they were a network of friends like Facebook with bios and pictures and listed interests or whatever. Really, you would do whatever it is that you need to do to figure out who your characters are extensively. You really gotta know them. Then you get into their arcs, especially if it's a story-rich game. I like to break this up in simple sections so that basically like whatever section I happen to be writing at the time, I know where they need to be emotionally. You often aren't writing cutscenes or gameplay sections in order. In fact, I've not done that in any of the games that I've worked on. It's always been a certain level or a certain cutscene that could be really late game, usually very, very out of order. So you need to have something tracking how the person would be feeling at all points in time so that you can reference it. What are they going through during the various stages of your story? How do they feel? How do they react? Are they growing and changing as people? Are they digging their heels in and being more stubborn? Are they losing things or gaining things? Basically, what happens to them specifically as a person or a character throughout the course of your game. Other things to include on character bios would be speech patterns. I really love doing this now. This is how they talk. Do they use contractions? Do they swear? Are they formal? Do they maybe lose track of what they're saying partway through sentences? Whatever their quirks are. You can include a list of words that they commonly use or favorite phrases. This is similarly a reference for your whole team if you have multiple writers, but also for yourself if you are a writer, to look at whenever you're writing dialogue for a particular character, so that as your world and your cast get bigger and bigger and bigger, you always have, again, that thing that is cohesively tracking that person or animal or cube, played by Jack Quaid.
What the f?
Then there's a web or a network regarding how they feel about each other. If you have a small cast, you can probably do this with just paragraphs. If I'm writing phase bio, I could add a section that would say, this is how she feels about Frank. This is how she feels about Rue. It's so weird to finally get to say these names publicly. It's so weird. So for a bigger cast, I'd use Miro or some other whiteboard tool that allows you to create a visual web of who knows each other, who hates each other, who likes each other, who loves each other, who wants something from someone else, like every connection that they have in a giant web. And then you'd create multiple iterations of this web for different acts of the story if needed. These are things I reference all the time with any game writing I do. I'm regularly looking at bios, speech guides, and relationship webs, so they're incredibly helpful. Third, so you got a bunch of story and a bunch of characters. No, you don't. Time to cut them. Really, tip 3 is always be cutting. There were events at Santa Monica Studio called the Scopening. Maybe one day I'll be able to talk about that more. It was a little funny. Parts of it were kind of shocking, but it was something that I learned very quickly that all studios should be doing pretty much at all times. If you are making a game as a writer or otherwise, you cannot be afraid to cut. Cut early. If you doubt something, cut before you've spent time on it. Certainly as a writer in AAA, the whole process is death by 1,000 cuts. Things are cut and sliced and diced as other departments come on board and tell you certain things are way more costly or way more time consuming than you first thought, and thus probably can't be animated and thus must be cut. Lines get cut. Characters get cut. There's like one of those characters that I still think about regularly. I wondered for a while if I could just write the short story version that I had of him in my head, because he's so real in my head, but I think because I technically developed him at Sony, they own him. And that's weird when it's a part of your brain. Obviously, it is an unavoidable fact of game development that things will be added. Someone adds something to a game every day by design. In order to maintain a balance, aka deliver the project on time, things must thus be cut. It can feel really brutal, but especially for indies, I think it's the difference between starting a game and finishing a game. Anyone can come up with 100 cool game design ideas. The people who finish games are the people who cut those 100 ideas down to 1 or 2 or 3 in order to actually tangibly make something. Be ruthless, be brutal, make video game. Fourth is my last general tip here. Understanding what your job actually is. As a writer, outside of, building the story and characters and then writing levels and dialogue and all of that expected stuff, at least to begin with, your job is actually just about communication. It is more important that you write things that the rest of your team, who may not be writers and may not even like reading, will actually read and be able to digest. It is far more important that the information that you share be accessible to everybody else on your team, since your job from your department is the one most responsible for communicating the story, than that your writing be flowery or pretty or deep. Keep it simple, make sure that everyone understands. There are some game studios that aren't story first or writer first, but I've actually never really worked at one of those, kind of, but not really. So I can't comment on that approach. But for me, I need to make sure that what I am writing for other departments is clear, concise, and easy to follow. That is a way more important part of the job than I ever would have guessed, even though it sounds like a no-brainer. 4 layers deep in building our world history and our lore, which informs why different parts of the map look the way that they do and are populated by whatever creatures they are. I wrote a 13-page short story that is written almost in a kid's storybook kind of way. It's broken up into eras of our world's history, of which there are 6, and written in a way that is intended to feel like a story you are being invited into, so it's still fun to read rather than a factual Wikipedia page style history doc. I don't intend to ever release this document publicly. Its entire purpose is to condense the pages and pages and pages and pages of notes that I madly scrolled together when building the story of this world into a way that is far more digestible to my team and hopefully more inspiring, because that's also a big part of the job. You are giving those people a story and a world and characters to connect to strongly enough that they're inspired to stick with them for however many years it takes to develop the thing. These people will be building this world for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours. So a lot of your job is writing for the team, with the team, consulting the team. The writing department, the writers at Santa Monica Studio also work really, really, really close with the narrative designers, who are also a really, really wonderful team that I loved working with. So basically everybody has input on story and narrative, level designers, animators, everyone there really, really, really cares about story. So pretty much every single department is giving feedback on that all the time. It is super important to inform the team, basically. I mean, really, at the end of the day, when people say making games is hard, what that is largely referring to is that the management of hundreds of fucking people who are, as I said earlier, experts in totally different fields. You have to make sure that they all understand and agree on the thing that they're making. And for every new person that you add, that gets harder. If you don't have some standard like cross-disciplinary means of sharing information, you basically don't stand a chance. A game director can't just walk into a room and going, we're making a racing sim, but Dark Souls, and expect to get cohesive results. What does that mean? It has to be about really specific ideas, communicated well, consistently, with genuine consideration for the real people whose skills and creativity bring your idea to life. Barring some exceptions, you cannot make a game without a team. Again, some incredible exceptions. Basically, lesson 4 is consider how much of your job is about your team and communicating with your team, and make sure you get those skills on board. Learn how to talk to different departments and how to support different departments depending on what your department is, because that is actually majority of what your job is. So those are my valuable lessons I learned from AAA that I now apply to all tiers of game development, and have also learned from other bits of game development. It's have stable pillars, detail the hell out of your characters, cut regularly, and recognize how much of your job is about interdisciplinary communication. If you would like more videos like this one, let me know. I don't want to saturate talking about God of War Laufey specifically a whole lot, because I recognize that I am very visible and there are many people on this development team who are not, who have worked on it longer than I have. Like, I wanted to make this video to finally talk about the things that I have that are advice, mostly for indies or people who want to make games themselves, but I don't want to make myself the main character of this thing. The people who should be the main characters really are the game director and the lead writer and the directors of all of the various departments, the art director. There's so many incredible people who work at this studio. So I don't want to touch on the game again specifically, but I am happy to talk about more game dev stuff in general, now that I feel like I can speak at least a little bit more freely about my experience. I definitely will have a video about the current landscape of indie publishing probably sometime next month, because layers deep, we spoke to a lot of publishers and did get a really good offer, but ultimately decided not to go with it for reasons that I will explain in the video. It's like the current publishing landscape for indie teams is very interesting, so I was definitely going to talk about that. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you all so much for the love regarding Laufey. It has been so wonderful and overwhelming. The post where I announced it is my most liked Instagram post ever, which is crazy to me. I was like, oh, you know, it's a work announcement, whatever, but it's just people have been so kind, and it's so nice and very nice to be able to talk about, obviously, and just congratulations again to everybody at Sony Santa Monica Studio. The game looks so incredible, and I cannot wait to play it. Also, don't ask me when it's coming out, because I don't know. When's it coming out, Corey? You gotta tell us. Give the people what they want.